Hi, Student Success. Welcome to week 2 of your 8-week course. We're done with week 1. We made it. I know week 1 is a little bit overwhelming because of the chapters that are covered and all the assignments, but you're here. We're through it. Week 2 is actually a little bit lighter, so that's some good news. So as a reminder, when you log into the course, again, you may still be kind of looking at the Start Here section if you need like little reminders about navigation or the syllabus or anything like that. You'll be kind of directed to the Start Here section. And then, of course, the course calendar, announcements, course messages, your grades. Please be checking those things frequently. Online course, you have to be really motivated, dedicated, and so part of that is just keeping up with everything. All right, so we're going to click into lessons. So by the time you view this video, I'm actually recording this video before week 1 has even started, but by the time you view this, week 1 will have been closed already and you'll see week 2 open down here. Before I click into week 2, however, I do want to say just a couple quick things. If you were a late registration, sometimes we have students who register like the Wednesday or Thursday of the first week, or even students who were registered, but they just didn't get into Blackboard until a little later and you missed a good portion, if not all of week 1. I do reopen week 1 toward the end of the 8-week session. I don't do it right away because too many folders open at once can be overwhelming for students, but toward the end of the semester, once you've got a hang of it, then I start to reopen week 1 so that you can revisit, you can make up some points, whatever the case might be for that. So just keep that in mind and look for those announcements around week 6 of the session. Also, your student services assignment, I will be reminding you of this just about every recording. Sorry about that. Remember, you have to go in and you have to attend an online workshop before the end of our week 8 session. And so all of them are uploaded and ready to view in the academic support tab of my Circ State Student Success workshops, and then all of them are done through Handshake. So if you haven't already signed up for a Handshake account, you'll need to do that in order to view or participate in the online Student Success workshop, or you can do an event with the Student Leadership Academy, and there's the link right there as well. When you have completed your workshop, you'll get like either a receipt of some sort, depending on the presenter, or like a certificate of completion. Whatever you receive, that's what you're going to upload in this actual Dropbox. And again, that's due by the end of week 8. And I will remind you every week. Sometimes I'll go more into depth, and sometimes I'll just kind of do a quick little blurb on it. All right, so let's go ahead and get into week 2. This runs from September 6th through the 12th. And I understand the 6th is a holiday. The physical campus is closed that day. However, online classes keep going. So week 2 opens. Now, if you are taking the day off for yourself, that's okay. Just click into it, on Tuesday the 7th. You'll still have a discussion forum due by Wednesday. So even if you are not logging in on Labor Day, you need to make sure that you do respond for your week 2 attendance points by Wednesday, that 8th. So you have 2 assignments this week. So this is what I mean, like it's a lot lighter than week 1. So we're in chapter 4. You'll have a chapter 4 assignment, and then you'll have a discussion forum based on a little survey that you're going to take. So again, original response for week 2 attendance is due Wednesday. Respond to 2 students by Sunday, and then your chapter 4 assignment is due Sunday as well. So let's go ahead and get into our materials folder. We're in chapter 4, so chapter 4 text I already have up and running in the background here, and chapter 4 slides I already have right here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the slides to guide our discussion, and then I'll kind of just click through the text just to point anything out or emphasize it one more time. But as a reminder, I know I said this in my week 1 video, I'll do like the lecture, and then it's your job to go into depth and read a little bit more, especially maybe there's a particular section that you really need to focus in on, and there's another section you can skim. So it's kind of up to you, but I always like to go over the content, and then your job as a student is to kind of dig a little deeper where needed, and then always feel free to ask questions, just as if we were in a face-to-face class. Send me an email, stop by and see me, send me a message, whatever you would like. All right, so chapter 4 is all about listening, taking notes, and remembering. And so the big takeaways from this chapter is that basically, again, I know they said this back in week 1, like college is different from high school, which if you have been out of high school for a little while, it might be to your benefit because it's almost like you're starting fresh. Sometimes students transitioning straight from high school to college have that adjustment period. You got to adjust your high school expectations to your college expectations. Personal responsibility, the importance of time management, and then the learning cycle. So that's what chapter 4 is going to focus on. All right, so chapter 4, talking about preparing yourself for class. So I know we are an online class, so you can kind of, if you're only taking online classes, you can kind of adapt these as needed for the online environment, because a lot of these still are relevant to when you are sitting at home or in the library or whatever it might be. And then they obviously still apply to when you take a face-to-face class. So mentally, what do you want to get out of the class? It's always good to kind of look at your syllabus or look at the calendar or whatever tool you have for the class and think, what am I trying to accomplish from this class? What do I want to walk away with? What's the main idea? And how is the content going to help me be better in this course, but also connect to maybe other courses I'm taking or my field in general overall? Physically, a lot of these are common sense, just kind of reminders. Physically, you want to make sure that you're sleeping, eating well. Make sure you have all your materials for class. I shouldn't say I'm surprised, because I've come to expect it. I've been teaching at the college level now for 11 years, and I still have students who come to my face-to-face classes with no pencils. And not just once or twice, that happens. I understand that. Almost every class, they won't have pencils, even though I'll give them some on Monday, and by Wednesday they're gone. So just simple things like that. Make sure you have your materials. Make sure you have everything you need to do. Make sure you're on time, so you have kind of that breather, even if it's just a few minutes, to kind of sit there, get your space set up, and then make sure all your other distractions are away. So if you're in a physical class, means actually putting your phone out of reach. If you're at home taking an online class, listening to a lecture, maybe your phone's in another room. So something that's going to kind of eliminate those distractions for you. So if you are in a physical classroom listening to a lecture, or you're listening to an online lecture such as this one, you still want to be in that right mind space. So at home or the library, wherever it might be, the right kind of space to help you mentally receive the information. Think about, connect what you've learned in a previous lecture. If you're in a physical classroom, sitting toward the front of the room, and then focus on what's being said. This kind of goes over what we just talked about this previous slide. Get rid of distractions, try to really focus on what's going on in the moment, and then look for signals if you are in a classroom and you can kind of see like the body language, but also listen to the voice. Are they talking more quickly? Are they raising their voice? Did they write something on the board? So all those are clues that, hey, this information is particularly important. Remember, this chapter talks about listening. So really trying to improve on those listening skills. So this is continued. Listen for what's not being said. I always tell my students in my reading classes, if you have chapter 4 coming up on Monday in a class, I would read that chapter over the weekend, because you're setting yourself up to easily receive the information. You're laying the groundwork of that prior knowledge that you're going to have. It also gives you a chance to take notes before class, and it can help you kind of clarify once you get into class, okay, I've already read this, I understand this section, but I need to know more about this section. So you can kind of focus on the lecture and not necessarily taking notes rapidly, because you already know some of it because you spent some time reading it. And you can also pay attention to the fact that maybe if an instructor doesn't cover a section, then that isn't as important in that class as maybe you thought it was as you read. So sorting through the information, taking notes. I know not everyone needs to take notes, and I know sometimes it's really stressed, but I have students who their audio strength is just as good, if not better in some cases, than if they were to take notes. And so just really relying on kind of the note-taking depth you need to do. So if you need to take notes, make sure you're taking them in a way that's effective. Cornell notes or concept maps or bullet points, whatever works for you. But if it doesn't work for you, if you take notes and then you never look at them again, or you don't even remember what you wrote to begin with, then maybe invest your energy in just listening or paying attention to the visuals, or some other way to kind of take in the information. But if you are a note taker, or if you're not sure if you're a note taker or not, you do need to kind of make sure that you are organizing your notes in a way that's going to be easy to look at and sort through later. Asking questions is something that you can't do enough of. You need to ask these questions. You're there in a class to learn, and odds are if you have a question, so does another student. So it's important to ask those questions. And then sometimes you're allowed to tape record a lecture. You need to get permission or have an accommodation for that. But that's a great way to kind of give yourself that ease of mind. Like, okay, if I miss something, I can go back and listen to it later. All right, so here are some examples if you've ever been in these situations, like if your instructor speaks too quickly, if your instructor has a heavy accent, or if your instructor speaks softly or mumbles. So I know I am guilty sometimes of speaking too quickly. And so I have to remind myself to kind of slow down. I know with my online classes, students can always kind of pause and go back. So it's more of an issue for me when I'm teaching face-to-face, but just let your instructor know, like, hey, you know what? Can you slow down? Can you repeat that? Maybe go and visit them in their office hours. So these are just kind of scenarios, if you do come across them, maybe ways to handle that particular situation. All right, so effective note-taking. So as I said a couple slides ago, note-taking is important. So if you are a note taker, or maybe you're on the fence, you're not sure if you need to take notes, here's why note taking is important. It does support your listening. It kind of sets you up for a study guide. Like, okay, I'm going to write these notes, and then this is the information I'm going to use to study and recall the information. There is a link between writing material down and remembering it, and it helps you highlight what's important. So there are lots of benefits to note taking. And our chapter, and I'll show you here in a few minutes, does give an idea of like different methods of note taking. So I know Cornell notes, some people really love this and some people don't, and I'll show you how it's set up here in a few minutes. But finding the method that's going to help you be the most organized and be able to use them most effectively is important. So I will show you that in, again, just a few moments when I kind of blow it up here over in that chapter. So also some note-taking tips, be prepared, obviously have your materials ready to go. Date and label your notes. I never thought how important this was until I think it was in my master's work. I didn't do it so much in undergrad, but I think when I started taking master's courses, and I had to go back constantly for my thesis and look at my notes, the importance of just labeling and numbering everything so that you have all that information there. If you're typing, make sure that you're putting it in a way that you can see everything. It doesn't kind of block the screen. Don't try to write down everything that's said. You're trying to pull out the key points, such as anything that the instructor copies down. Maybe come up with your own shorthand or your own method for kind of looking and keeping track of your questions. Review your notes as soon as possible after class. It's usually, the rule is within 24 hours. So even that evening, just go home and review your notes, and that way right away you can kind of oh, I'm missing something right here, and you can maybe email and ask a question instead of waiting days later to I don't even know what this is. And then write a summary of your notes in your own words. So that some people think that is double duty, but if you can summarize, that you've got it. So that's another way of kind of just enhancing your learning. So here are some tips on if you miss class. Again, this might sound like common sense, but it doesn't. Students don't always follow through. Check your syllabus, check in with the instructor, see if you can have a classmate borrow notes from. So all of those, just make sure you're doing those kind of things. And then this is the section on memory. So here are some memory tips. If you've ever struggled with kind of learning a lot of information, I know students who take, I'll say medical terminology is one of the classes that I've noticed students struggle with because they have so much to learn in such a little amount of time that these could kind of help in those situations. So you want to make sure that you're linking information to your everyday life. Learning only has meaning when it has meaning to you, which means, if you learn something and you're just meh, I'm just learning this just to get a grade, but you're not connecting it to your actual maybe daily life or your career or another class, it's not going to kind of stick quite as well. You want to link information to what you already have stored. So you want to build that schemata. You want to build a bridge from what you already know about a subject to what you're learning about it so that you can kind of start grouping it all together. Come up with memory strategies, where this is given an example of individual items into buckets. So categorize different things, use visuals as needed, break things down into manageable chunks. So, if you have a whole chapter to learn, just section it out, break it down. Eliminate distractions, repeat information. There is a reason when you were in elementary school, I know because my kids still did this. My oldest is only in 5th grade now, and he just did this as recently, I think, as in 4th grade. They had to write their spelling words like multiple times. Well, because there is research to support the more repetition, the better it is going to be kind of transferred from your short-term to your long-term memory. Now you have to store it and work with it for it to become meaningful and really stick, but that repetition does help. Test your information, meaning create practice tests so that you practice recalling, because honestly, we can remember something for the rest of our lives. It's there, it's in our brain. Things from our childhood are there in our brain. You know, unless there's been some sort of injury, we can remember everything. So why do we forget things? It's because we don't practice retrieving it. It's there in our long-term memory, but once we stop practice retrieving the information, it gets so lost in our long-term memory that we're not going to ever be able to recall it again. So you want to practice retrieving information. So that's where flashcards, study groups, practice tests, all those kind of things come in, because you're practicing retrieving information from your long-term memory. All right, so that's kind of the slides for the chapter. As I said, for the actual chapter, you know, it always starts off with kind of like this assessment. Think about where you are with these different topics with remembering, listening, note-taking. This goes over the differences between high school and college. As I said, if you're fresh out of high school, it might be good to kind of look and see what are the differences and how are you going to be expected to change. Our next section talks about setting yourself up for success. So this is, again, getting in this learning process where you want to make sure that you're preparing yourself, get ready to get new ideas, take notes, record, pay attention to visuals, and then constantly review or apply it. Here's a section that talks about making sure you're ready for class. What are the things you want to do before class? We already talked about, you know, coming up with the main idea, connected to other things in your life, how you can physically be prepared. Listening. This is the section on listening. So if you know that you are struggling a little bit on listening, you might look at this section a little bit more in depth. This talks about active listening in particular. So if you've ever found yourself in a conversation where you're not really listening to someone, you're just waiting your turn to talk, you might need a little bit of help with your active listening. So here are some tips on, you know, what active listening is and the things that you should be doing to become an active listener. And again, this goes over just more in detail some of the things we already talked about in our slides. Okay, and then this next section on note-taking, as I said, it talks about the different types of notes, and here's a little bit larger. So it gives you a different like a method, the description, and when you should use it, and it gives you diagrams on each of those, like what does lists look like? How do we use the outline? Concept map. And here's that Cornell note-taking method I mentioned. It's a way to really organize, like I said, some students really like this because on this column, you put your keyword, your question, your concept. Over here, you define it, answer it, go into more detail, and then it kind of sets up like a study guide automatically. So it really helps students who might struggle with that organization piece. So it goes all the way into, again, more detail about that. Lots of that on Cornell notes. And then here are some general tips on note-taking, which again we saw on the slides not too long ago. All right, and then remembering, if you struggle with memory, this is the section again that you want to really pay attention to, again, because I want you to really hone in on what's important to you. If note-taking is you've got it down, then you might not need to look at that section as much, but maybe you struggle with memory, so this is where you want to go. So this is going to talk about how important memorizing is, and how at the college level you're not going to have to memorize a ton of stuff, and you shouldn't, but you want to make sure that you are using strategies to be able to remember things. So this is going to go through like the memory process. How does memory work? And what can you do to connect information from your short-term to your long-term memories? This is going to go into more detail. The bullet points on our slide talked about each of these, but this goes into more detail if you wanted to try, like, what does that mean by buckets, or what does it mean to chunk things? So this goes and tells you just a little bit more on how to do each of those things. There's a little memory exercise here, which we actually do in this class, but this is kind of on your own if you want to try it. And here are some different strategies. Mnemonics, you've probably used something like this before, and they give you like Holmes, or one of the most famous one is probably PEMDAS or Roy G. Biv, you know, things like that. Creating acronyms, little devices to help you remember things. Acrostics, so they give some examples of acrostics. My son just used something like that with this actually. And his was like us noodles or something, like, because they didn't talk about Pluto because it's called Pluto. Anyway, this is an example of an acrostic where they used every, you know, the first letter to come up with like kind of a word and then a sentence, and it helps you. If you're in music, you've probably heard that every good boy deserves fudge, or every girl does fine, or whatever those are. So acrostics are a way to do that. Rhymes and jingles. When I was working on my doctorate and I had to study for my comprehensive exams, I was constantly coming up with different rhymes and songs and things like that. And I sounded like a crazy person around my house, but it really helped me because for some reason I connected with these different rhymes and songs and things that helped trigger my memory. So these are all different strategies, again, that you might be able to use. All right, so that is chapter 4. So again, I encourage you to spend more time as needed, whatever section you think you can most benefit. We're going to go ahead now and talk about your 2 assignments for this week. So your first assignment is connected to your discussion forum. How well do you listen survey? So you're going to click here, and it's going to be one of those where it opens up into a new window. There we go.
Now that you've read about this,
talk to you. And so you're going to type your name right here, and you're going to hit continue. And it's going to ask you a series of questions, and you're going to, is this always true? Sometimes true, never true. And it's going to give you kind of a result at the end. You have to complete that in order to respond on your discussion forum. So this isn't graded right here, but you need those results in order to respond to your discussion forum. So here's how you're completing your discussion forum. You take the survey and then you just answer these 3 questions. How did you do? Did the results surprise you? What is your plan for improvement? So tell me how, and you can just do it like 1, 2, 3 if you wanted to, or you can put it in like a paragraph format, whatever the case is. So how did you do? Oh, the survey said I need to work on my listening skills. I'm really surprised because I think I'm a good listener. In order to improve, I think I'm going to work on eliminating distractions. So like that's an example right there of kind of a discussion forum response. So remember to put an original response. You click there, create thread, and it repeats the prompt. Put your subject, put your body, hit submit. Okay, now I've got to kind of click back. There we go. Oh no. So that's how you do your discussion post. Okay. Remember, you want to put your original response by Wednesday for week 2 attendance, and then go in there and respond to 2 students. And when I say response, it's not just good, I agree, I disagree. Like give them like a sentence, or like actually do a meaningful response. And then you want to respond by Sunday in those two other classmates. All right, and then your other assignment this week is chapter 4 assignment. It's going to be a Microsoft Word document. So you're going to click right here and it's going to open up Word. And this is going to talk about the 3 key things that this chapter focused on: listening, note-taking, and memory. So you want to pick 2 things in every category that you're going to do to improve. So what do you need to improve with your listening? Maybe you know that you get distracted easily. So what 2 things are you going to do to improve your listening? What 2 things you're going to do to improve your note-taking? What 2 things you're going to do to improve your memory? And this, you might have to go back in and like click into the chapter or click back into the slides. You're like, oh gosh, I can't remember, which might mean you need to work on some memory strategies. Or, go back to whatever section, maybe the note-taking section, and try to figure out, okay, maybe there's things that the text that I can do. So 2 things for listening, 2 things for note-taking, 2 things for memory. When do you expect to take the action? So maybe for some of you, your next time you're in a face-to-face class, or the next time that you listen to a lecture. So when, and then how will you know you've accomplished the action? How will you know your listening's improved? How will you know your note-taking's improved? And how will you know your memory has improved? And so when you're done, you want to file, save that, on your desktop or wherever it is. Come back to your assignment, click in. browse, find wherever you saved it, hit open, and then submit. All right, so as a quick recap for this week, you are looking at the materials for Chapter 4, and then by Wednesday, you're posting your original response in this forum and responded to classmates by Sunday, and then your Chapter 4 assignment is due Sunday as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and have a great week.